Hey legends, welcome back to Punching Sideways. Today is part one of a two-part interview that we were lucky enough to do with local musician and bass guitar legend Adam Pica. So some of you may know bits and pieces of Adam's story, which is a really wide-ranging journey. And I was personally only aware of some of the things that Adam's done in his music career and some of the challenges that he's managed to face and overcome, and also some that he continues to face. So today we focus mostly on Adam's early introduction to the bass, to being in bands. There's some great local band stories mixed in today's episode. And then we also talk about one of his big original music achievements and projects, which was Neon City. Everything can be found over at punchingsideways.com, or check the show notes where you're listening and we'll link up all the things. Righto, let's jump in.
My thing is I can't actually do anything, but I can run through the analytics and tell you exactly what you're doing wrong. I just
with music,
just in general, I tend to go through the brain hoops, and if I'm applying something like, right, I can tell what you're going with that. Music, actually, I'm not a musician at all, but I can hear and see now what people
Have you had a try? You would have for sure.
Not really.
What stopped you doing that?
What stopped me?
Yeah.
Time.
Yep.
Time, and now that I know and have been in the world more, the respect to the level of the time that is involved to be good. Yeah. I don't think I have that.
But you only have to be as good as what you want to be. There's no expectation of being, you don't have to say I need to be at this level. You got to start somewhere. This guy could teach you because he thinks he's a shit teacher.
Absolutely not. There's no way that I'm getting Josh to teach me to do anything musician. I sort of like to, when I'm doing all the music stuff, that I don't have a personal vested interest in being on stage in that capacity, and I think people actually trust that I don't have an agenda either because of that reason. I'm just there to try and help facilitate versus get myself on stage.
So do you reckon there's an expectation of musos around here that if you started to play, you'd want to be invested interest for you to get up and play? And like, I'm thinking,
I don't think so now, but I think it has
early on.
I'd say, maybe they might like me to get up there. Maybe one day. Maybe you don't even know. I could be doing all this underground practicing and then just pop up on stage and
come out like Van Halen.
Unreal.
Where did she come from?
I do have little like internal things like that I like to work on projects and then just be like fucking bah. But music's not one of them right now.
I was practicing behind the scenes to try and get back to somewhat of a level compared to my old version of myself, and I pretty much made public recently by going back to guitar lessons that I was struggling to get back there. But it's got me super excited about playing guitar.
It's funny you say that, mate. And the reason why it kind of what you said about I've got to get back to the standard that I was before I'm valued or before I see myself as valued. Now, you guys know that I had the brain tumours and all that sort of stuff. And for years, I couldn't play bass. Over the past 10 years, there was a number of years where I was unable to play. And previous to that, I was doing a lot of study, a lot of practicing, 4 or 5 hours, and I was set to do a certain path for myself that I wanted. And then it just stopped. And now I'm in a situation where if I go back to tapes and all the rehearsing that I did in 2006, 2007, I'm a quarter of the player that I am now. Like, I was so much better. And then there was a realization, and that's why I asked the question, because the love of music is more than the desire to be at the top of the tree. And for me, it was like, okay, have an expectation of where you want to be standard wise, and that's okay. And because my capacity for my brain doesn't allow me to do certain things anymore.
Okay.
So I just had to accept the fact that I wasn't where I want to be, but I'm okay with that today because of the circumstances. And we've known each other for a long, long time, and I've always known that you drive so hard to be a musician and want to play and be that, and that's stressful. So I let all that go, and then I enjoy it more now. And I'm a decent player, but I'm not where I would want to be if none of this stuff happened.
Well, we won't dwell on it too much, but I've had multiple phases where that was my whole life, and then a period where I thought maybe it wasn't going to be, and then a couple of years recently where I wasn't really too concerned if it wasn't. But I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had to let go of the fact that when I was practicing multiple hours a day, and I was writing in an epic clip. I was just churning out riffs. And I might not ever actually allow that space in my life either for that to become what it was. But I've only recently just realised I can still really enjoy this even if I'm not the player technically that I used to be. Because you can get very much in technical brain because I can't play technically like I was. I'd kind of convinced myself that meant that I can't write a song anymore. I can't do the other stuff anymore. Like I won't be as respected, so maybe I should just leave that in the past. Yeah, it's confusing and it's hard. Obviously, it's not anything like what you've been through.
No, it is. See, I don't believe that one's challenges and upheavals in life are any more dramatic or important than anyone else's. So what I mean by that is if I go through my challenges of cancer, brain tumours and that, a guy could break his toe and believe that it's that dramatic, and I don't judge a person on that. So your experiences and everything that you've gone through is just no less or no greater than mine. And it's how we mentalise it, I guess, for the word, and deal with it. And that's the challenge that I've had to face for, this has been 10 years, since 2013. So, and it's the enjoyment of playing music. I spend more time in my studio at home playing that no one hears me doing stuff.
Okay. I want to close the circle on, you did say that whatever it was we were talking about spurred you to ask Mel the question. Like specifically, is it that that the journey can be worthwhile even if you don't become a great player? Is that what that means?
Absolutely. We all, as musicians, when we're kids, we want to be in the biggest rock band and we want to tour Australia, tour the world and do this and all that. And that's exactly right. It's okay to go, I can sit at home if I have 15 minutes and play the guitar with no expectation but just the enjoyment. And if that's the thought process, then really good things come from that, because when you are hell-bent on being the best, sometimes you lose who you are. And I don't think you can do that in music. I think it's a soulful thing. So, yeah.
I just want to, I know that Josh thinks that he's closed the circle, but he absolutely hasn't, because
we can talk about anything.
Your little reference then to the broken toe.
Yeah.
Actually just reiterates something that I tend to channel quite a lot, is that everyone's journey up to one point has been different. Doesn't matter whether you have the same parents, they've theoretically been brought up the same, your influences and everything are very different. And you and I right now could right side by side fall over and break our wrist in the exact same way. And the way that you and I both respond to that could be completely different because of the lead up to that point. And I tend to reflect a lot because everyone's way they deal with something is relative to what has happened to them. And it could be the worst thing in the world to break your toe if you're one person. But for, say, for instance, you're just like, I've got a broken toe, I'll just hop on my other leg, because that's nothing in perspective to your journey.
Exactly. And I don't, people talk to me about, things we talk about, and then they look at me and go, and they say all wonderful, beautiful things. And I haven't had your journey in this, but you kind of have, because that's your journey, and your upheavals and your challenges are no greater than what I have to do or no less than what I have to get through. They're just different. And I agree completely with that analogy, and I just don't put anyone down if, I don't, it's just not worth it.
I think it's the ability to be able to like step back out of yourself and look at someone else's perspective of things and not necessarily like you can still, I'm not saying I'm not a judgmental person. I'm very judgy, but I always will snapshot judge and then step back and go, okay, what has led that person to that behavior or and there's always so much below that superficial surface that
I've done that. I used to not judge out, but go, oh yeah. And then I think that what changes the situation is circumstances that change your life dramatically,
Yeah.
And then through my experiences, I do what you do without judging first and step back and go, what's happening here? And you become more of a leveled person on so many levels.
So that's fascinating, and I'm going to bookmark that in my brain and come back to that because
definitely.
You're talking about a big incident in your life, an inciting kind of incident that created maybe a new person or a new version of you. But can we go back maybe to
wherever you want, mate.
To the start of? I think some people might be familiar with you from your different musical careers that you've had, and you've had many.
Yep.
But I think Mel and I both mentioned earlier, we just wanted to know, where did this start for you?
If I was going to basically, Adam Pica is like an enigma / nursery rhyme that I didn't even know was real or not real. So
Mel was standing at the door like, is this guy going to...
I don't even know. Is this like just...
Am I messaging a bot?
Yeah, I don't know. So...
I've been very Phantom-like the last 2.5, 3 years, yes.
So, yeah, who were you?
Yeah, look, I do you want me to go back to where I started?
Who were you? That's the best.
I was a real cheeky kid, not naughty or anything like that, but just loved life, cheeky, a lot of fun. Anyway, long story short, I got into high school, and you guys Josh, you might know Jamie Payette, Jaff.
I know the name.
Yeah, so Jaff our families were very, very, very close, and I was about 13, 14, and the school, Catholic college, started a musical, and it was called Music, Music, Music. And Jamie just said
Great name.
Yeah, well, it was a 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, because 90s wasn't around. I'm getting old.
We'll edit that bit out.
Yeah. So it started there, and Jamie just said, look, we're doing 50s. I need a bass player, and I'll teach you how to play a 12-bar blues. So he sat down in his home, Mum would go around and see Maurice, and he would teach me for 3 or 4 months leading up to this musical experience of playing a 12-bar blues. The boom, 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 change to the fourth. And it was so basic, but I was never a natural. I don't have any natural ability at all. All I did was work really, really hard. So anyway, we went into the practice rooms and that, and then we did this musical, and it just started from there. Jamie, we got a band, and got Dom Alessi on guitar and Andrew Marotta on drums. And I was only 14, Jamie was 16, and we started playing. And very, very lucky that my father and Tony, again, good family friends, Tony Alessi were business people in Albury Wodonga, and they had us working straight away. So I was never a bass player that sat at home thinking, this is boring. I was playing in, the Albury Country Golf Club, and these gigs and Morty's down on Dean Street. And and so I was lucky. So I was playing gigs, and it just took off from there, and it was a lot of hard work.
I'm not sure how much you've listened to the show, but we do tend to follow our curiosities. And one thing you said in there was natural talent.
Yeah.
What were you seeing because you mentioned a couple of people in there that I recall being monster players the whole time I can remember them.
Yep.
What was it that you were seeing in them that you didn't feel you had when it come to a natural aptitude? I was always the worst in the band.
Okay. I was always early on.
Was it their ear for being able to break down songs, or what was it that you were?
Still to this day, my ears are the weakest point of myself as a musician. Although we didn't have the technology that we had today to learn songs, so we had to sit down and learn them. But it took me a long time. I didn't understand music. I didn't understand how a rhythm section worked. I didn't understand anything. And I was just so overwhelmed with Jamie and how brilliant he was. And he was a very, very close mate, and all that family. I just listened to him.
Yep.
And that was it. And then it progressed, and then I started learning a little bit more about things.
But you must have had some kind of determination there, because I know that I've met lots of musicians in my time that when they get in situations where they're overwhelmed by other people's talent, they feel like, why bother? Like, why am I here? So you must have had just an internal drive of some kind.
Yeah, we were family. The band was like my best mate's playing guitar, my other best mate's playing guitar, and Andrew's doing what Andrew does. So we didn't feel that we had these different levels within us. So, but I've always been extremely determined to succeed. I've always had that nature in me to go, and it's pressure and on myself. I must succeed. I must. And I just worked and worked, whether it was sports, whether it was music, whatever it was just, I'm not going to fail.
So it must have been validating to be out playing gigs then, because you were getting some feedback. It was audiences and crowds.
Well, let's just say at 14 years of age, I learned how the world worked pretty quickly.
Yeah.
There's some stories there that just blows my mind today that I look back on and go, jeez.
Can you share, like, as a 14-year-old, what was, there would be a moment where you would have just gone, pfft.
Yeah. Well, look.
Without naming or shaming.
No, I won't name or shame, but my memory it's crystal clear. So I just remember so much. So I mentioned before Morty's, and back then you'd go down you go down the end of Dean Street and walk down to, the gardens down there, and you'd come across 15, 16 venues playing music. It was just crazy. So much. So I played this gig at Morty's, which was where the three-legged dog was, and I was 14 years of age, probably in year 8. So the memory's quite. So we're up against the where the street was. So you're facing down that way. And Morty's had a horseshoe bar.
Yeah.
And I'm playing, and we're just doing some stuff, and then I realise she's no longer in Albury. So that's my primary school teacher, year 6 primary school teacher. So I go, okay. And she walks in, and I'm watching her, and then she just goes down. This is a 14-year-old kid. She just goes down to the corner of the venue, starts making out with this person. And I'm going, okay, this person is another female.
Oh,
and I go, does that shit happen? I'm going, what? What's going on here? And then I just think, okay, so this is what happens. So that was one, another one. It's crazy. I was at Corowa RSL, and a couple is making out under a table and getting really serious about it. And Tony, Alessi and Dad are just, they're guiding us through all this, and they're very mature men and that. And I'm just going, this is just, okay, so this is how the world works. So I've been,
just as RSL.
So at that age, were you guys involved at all in doing the bookings and handling the money? Did they let you guys do that, or they were handling that?
They were very serious. So Dad and Tony did all that. We were too young, and they looked after us, and how serious they were. I remember, again, at Morty's, another show. See, my mates were working at Macca's for $3.50 an hour, and I was playing – I had to give up cricket and sport, which I absolutely loved because music was taking too much of a time. So we're playing at Morty's, and all my buddies have gone out to the movies, and, it's just across the road. So I said to Dom, come on, let's go down and see them. So we left the venue, and it was in between a break, and we get back and we got scolded. We just – Dad – not crazy, but You can't leave the venue. You are working for a wage. You are doing X, Y, and Z. You can't go down there. You must stay here and all this sort of stuff. So it was very controlled. As soon as I turned 18, mate, I said, Dad, we're done. We don't need you anymore. And I can drive a car and see you later. So he started
Did your bookings go in the tank then?
No, because, look, I'm a bit like, Dad, you obviously know that I can talk. So that's all I've been doing. So I was listening to Dad books, so I took up that and I took over that, and I think that's where it ended up me being in most of the bands that I was playing, in a way, driving the ship with gigs and making things happen. But yeah, we got rid of our fathers and mothers and all that by the time we were 18. It's, we're right, we can go to Finley and have a great weekend down there and hang out with all the...
No one in their life has ever said we will go to Finley and have a great weekend and life.
I'm telling you right now, some of those, there's even flow days with Dan and Luke Klepiak, and some of those, they're the crazy experiences. Blokes would absolutely have a ball. They play footy, that day, and that they would die for each other on the ground, and they'd have a great win, and then they'd come to the Albion Hotel and have a great night, and at 12:30, 1 o'clock, then they just start punching on, and you go, what are you guys doing? And, it was just wild times. So Finley, Denny, Berrigan, all those venues. Oh, geez.
Yeah,
stories.
We played a gig at the Yanko RSL, which is between Griffith and Leeton, and it's a real hardcore rugby town. And the captain must have said something reasonably insulting or tried to tell one of the big front rowers what to do. And I don't know what song we were playing. We're up on this massive stage, thankfully, way above. It was like a pretty weird gig. The bigger of the guys grabbed the captain by the head and smashed him through a table. And then it was just an all-out brawl for about 5 minutes. And then they hugged, and then they danced again. And then because we thought the gig was over. We're like, oh, well, there's no security here. These guys are bigger than the guards anyway. How is this ever going to get stopped? And then someone just yelled something, one of the older, statesmen of the club, and then there was just, okay, we're not fighting anymore.
I remember, Mel, we were kids, and you'll get this, and I think you will too. So Andrew Marotta and I, and we played a gig at Midda. So we play the gig, and we're walking back down, and then there's all these footy guys, you boys Tallangatta boys. I said, no, we're not from Tallangatta. Because we're just going to, and Andrew and I are we're like 15, something like that. And they're asking us, are you Tallangatta boys? Because we're going to get stuck into you. And it was the same night that Dom and I are in this, I wouldn't even call it a room, but it was this place where we slept in, and the window was smashed, and then there's this cow that's put the head through the window. And Dom and I go like this. My brain is it's so many memories. It's just wonderful stuff. So I get what you're saying, mate.
Yeah.
It's actually really nice watching you two.
Oh, I've got so much respect for Josh because I know.
Oh, not because of that's taken.
Yeah, don't ever say that. Josh and respect him.
Sorry, you've ruined it. You've ruined it.
All right,
I was getting all nice and happy feel.
Listen to us here, Mel.
If you like us, like I like us, get onto punchingsideways.com, give us a bit of a likesy, have a bit of an exploration around, and maybe buy us a coffee.
What was the first original project that you're in? Because I'm assuming that was mostly covers in that era.
Yeah, so Bad Moves went into... I got Luke Klepiak and Dan Whiting, and Dom was in there for a while, and it moved into Even Flow, which then Dan Famici played. And then we were doing that, and we were pretty successful with all that, doing really well. And Triple J, the first original thing, Triple J were coming to town, Unearth, the original. We put together some songs, and it just, as a group, I don't know, maybe the expectation of we have to be a certain way because this is what people have known us as a cover band, and we found it difficult. And that started the creative process, but nothing really came from that. And then it was with Simon and Liam with Neon City, and that was they're fantastic songwriters together. I will always stand by how creative they were and how well they worked together, and there was no secrets. We wanted to write commercial pop hits, and we did, but they were great songwriters.
So
back then.
we will definitely talk some Neon City in a sec.
Yeah.
Just to go back, so your first feeling around original music, was it, even though you're obviously, I mean, you're well respected through that time period, particularly for being a monster player.
Yeah.
Were you feeling at all like, oh, going out and playing these songs is not the same as being able to create something of the same quality? Or was it you were feeling like you needed to sound like the bands that you were into?
No,
like, what was it?
Back then, like I had a personality within me that I was, when you're on stage, I was brilliant. I was the best. Doesn't matter what I was playing, but I kicked ass all the time. The band kicked ass, and we're ready to destroy people, and we thought our stuff was brilliant. But at the end of the day, looking back on it, we struggled because it was pretty shit. So there was no ill feeling that, I know that when I said we have to write songs like this, we actually thought we were, but the reality is that I don't think it just gelled as an original band, and that happens.
Yeah, well, it happens more often than not.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Think that maybe because your pre-existing persona with cover bands was already there and people sort of liked the way that you guys performed, that maybe no one actually said to you, hey,
absolutely,
pull your head in, maybe do this, like no one actually offered constructive criticism? Because I think that's a thing that people get afraid of doing, is maybe hurting people's feelings by actually trying to help them. There's a bit of a balance, right?
That
you don't want to shatter someone, but
that's right.
Yeah,
that's so much the case. But back then it was, we didn't want to take criticism because we knew that this was grunge. This is, you go in there and playing in a band is not, it's warfare, and you're up there with your mates and you want to just demolish everything, the audience, the other bands. You want to wipe. The mental side of it was, this is what I've grown up listening to, and this is how these bands operated back in the 90s. They just wanted to it was that era. And
the first thing Nirvana did was ended the career of about 500 hair metal bands as soon as Nevermind came out.
Absolutely.
And they were the poster child of a band that destroyed a genre.
Absolutely.
Almost,
so I was, growing up as a teen, when it hit, and there was we liked the bands that were playing for in town and all that sort of stuff. And the musos were friends, but we wanted to destroy them. So when someone would come and say, oh, you should do, it's just like, why don't you just piss off? Because we are the monsters. What got us is that we played at the Albion Hotel, and it was a really sad day, a sad moment for the band. We went from the cover band, and then we went to the Astor, as an original band, because the Albion stopped. And we charged $2 at the door to come and see our first original show, and it was packed. And the guy that was running the joint at the moment wanted to save a bit of money on PA, and the PA was no louder than my bass amp. So we go there, and it's just falling down, and I'm just like, all our hearts were ripped out. And I said to the boys, we've got to turn this around. So we ended up playing covers again and getting through with what we did. And that moment, whether maybe the songs were okay, but that moment at that gig just completely stopped everything.
Mel brought up an awesome concept really before about the constructive criticism. I don't think in my entire time in Albury that, other than maybe right now where there seems to be a particularly supportive community of people that
absolutely.
Are all 100% behind each other, I don't think that there was ever a culture of anything being seen as constructive if it was critical. I don't think anyone was open to it. I can't name a person. It didn't feel as though it was a scene where anyone could have any comment on your music without it being seen as a negative.
Yeah, I agree. And different scenes have different demographics too. Like, so I'm thinking the guys that were 20 years older than us would have had our mentality now, and it's okay to pass on some constructive criticism and stuff like that, and they'll take it. But at our age, at that time, and those young kids, there was nothing there. We were a team, and you're against us, and that was it. I remember talking to a John Grattan, who's, he's legendary around here and stuff like that. In the 70s, there was warfare with the Albury bands and the Wodonga bands. They wouldn't come together and have members. You're from Victoria, they just wouldn't do it. And Saturday nights, and it was just like. So and they were teenagers back then. So maybe it's got to do with being a teenager.
We learned the lessons too late.
I think
Benjamin Button, got to go backwards.
Maybe, I don't know. I keep very neutral to everyone, and maybe this is why me not actually being involved with anyone in or doing any music myself makes me have this very naive mentality that I can just roll in and say things from a place of care, and most of the time it's received fairly well. I do not sugarcoat. Oh yeah, I do. I don't want to break, but you time it. And what I'm sort of maybe leaning towards was that maybe that whole mentality was that, one, you didn't want to receive it, but two, it wasn't delivered in a constructive way. Could that be part of it?
I would say so.
Yeah.
I would say that it would have been delivered in a way to take your confidence, not help you be better.
Yeah, it's hard to say because, to be honest, I didn't have any muso around that age coming to me and criticising the band. I think maybe they just thought there's no point. We're talking to Adam about it.
Maybe you're already, and this is probably part of the problem, was you're already good before you maybe needed some, and you had, like you said, Tony and that said to you that time that you ran out. And that's a very good point of etiquette towards what you're doing. And a lot of young people, that sounds very old saying that, but it is important to realise that you are working, and and you are representing, and this isn't just a fun roll in, roll out thing. There's a level of responsibility. So I think you got that lesson pretty early on.
And that's only been magnified as I've moved on as a musician and moved into more professional situations, that if I didn't have that upbringing and that mentality, I wouldn't be where I am, because I'm not a gifted player, but what I am is reliable. I'm never going to let the person down. I'll have my shit together and I'll give 100%. Now, when you get to a certain level, it's not about the musicianship within that individual. It's about the personality, and it's about their professionalism towards their job. So there's a billion better players, but sometimes I get the gigs because Adam's Adam, and you know that what you're going to get.
You make everyone else's life easier.
You're a good
you would
hang.
like to there's people that don't enjoy my company.
You mentioned one bit, and I just want to double down on it before we progress.
Yeah.
That saving money on the sound and really just crushed you.
Yeah.
And I just want to highlight how important sound guys are to the industry, because I think that they're often just behind the scenes, but to have a good sound guy versus just a hack that doesn't care and is just turning something on and off. Even I can tell the difference in the level of conscientiousness, and actually it's so important, whether you're well rehearsed or not, to have someone that is in tune and can make you sound better, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've never seen a show where I thought the sound was horrible, but I loved the band.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Nothing comes to mind.
I think the respect comes from how the person goes about their own business and their own, my father always used to say to me, your name is your business, and if a sound guy rocks up and he's late and he's irritable and you kind of start looking at him and going, this is for across the board for any industry, any person. What are we going to get here? So when you come across people that are dedicated to their profession, whatever it is, that are committed to making a product better, the respect for that person is amplified. So you know, if a guy locally is running around and for 2.5 hours trying to find a PA and there's an hour and a half before the gig, you kind of think maybe I'm not going to work with them. But the professional people, and at certain levels, you don't get a second chance. So they are at their peak and professional as anyone. But you are correct, you know, 100%. I've always said you're only as strong as your weakest link. And in a band, and that can be for any organisation, in a band, if it's your sound guy, it doesn't matter how good you play, it's going to sound really average. So it's critical.
So Neon City, 2011-ish, I remember seeing you guys play a couple of gigs at the Crown Lounge at Beer Deluxe. I think it was already Beer Deluxe at that point.
That's correct, yep.
And you mentioned that you were trying to write pure pop songs.
Commercial pop
songs.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
You feel like you did achieve that, and that's what they were as far as my ears were concerned, and they were really great songs with some really great musicianship. How were those early conversations? Was everyone in complete agreement that we want to write this style of music?
Well, you know, that started was either Simon or Leon, I'm not sure. They got in touch with me. They were doing
Simon McKenna and Leon Dalby.
Sorry,
mate.
Yeah. They were doing a little segment on one of the local radio stations, and I listened to a song. I can't remember one of the song called, but it's on the EP. They said, we're going to be on, and I had a listen, and then they contacted me and we spoke, and I kind of gave them my thought process of the song, and it got there, you know. So we started jamming around, and they were the creative force behind that band. And then when Trav came on and myself, we were free to, you know, add to that and write our parts and do all that. There was no, you know, that underlying yuckness that happens in the original. It was open, and
you guys were free to add as much colour and layers.
Yeah, but there was an understanding that those guys wrote about 75-80%.
Yeah, you weren't writing 70s prog songs.
No. Yeah. So it worked with that, and we kind of sort of said, all right, let's get a residency because we want to write an album, and we want to financially we need the money. So that's how that came up there, and we played for a year for $5 entry, and I think we got about $12,000 or $13,000 in the bank. And then just before that, we recorded an EP with Ralph Carr, who was a 90s guy. It was a budget EP, and it worked really well. But he put us in touch with Spid, who plays for Electric Mary now. So Spid was, you know, the drummer on that album, and he played gigs with us. He was in the band, and we then went off and went to Ricky Ray, and it cost us a lot of money, and we got a loan, and we spent another 12-13 grand on top of that, and we were serious. Yeah. And
that was for the first EP or the first album?
That was the album that we recorded in 2013, and you know, we I think runners up of the Oz Music Rock, one of the songs came runners up in Australia, and then that's when all the shit happened with me with the health, and things got sideways.
Okay,
there.
Adam, feel free not to answer this.
Yeah,
I realised from watching you guys how integral you were to the sound.
Yeah.
But I guess a question that we've all had was, what role were you playing in the band beyond just being on stage that would mean that the band would have to stop in a way? Because when I moved to Melbourne in 2013, my band at the time, Candela Light, they did basically just stop.
Yeah.
Like, was there a reason beyond they couldn't fulfill the bass role? Like, I'm just trying.
No, they did. They got Brock Shirley in there.
So they were playing after
that
point.
Yeah, for a period of time. And it was a situation where Brock came to rehearsals and I was showing him parts. So it's the first band that I ever got sacked out of because of my behaviour and how it was just, I was hard to understand, and I would have done the same thing. So, but on the other side of Adam, he's got this guy that's coming in that's going to take my role and all the passion and love that you put into the arrangements of the songs and all that. And I was okay with that. And it went for a period of time, but a short period of time, but elements change, and you know, bands, there's a uniqueness about Spid. When I left, Spid left, and the other guys did a great job, but there's a uniqueness.
And I had no context on that, so I really had no idea.
Yeah.
And
no,
because you did mention that you were quite often behind the scenes, not only contributing creatively to things, but also driving the business of different bands. And
definitely. There was a big portion of that, you know, guidance, and we spoke, essentially Liam, Simon and myself spoke quite openly about the direction, and we all got along really, really well with that, and it worked really well, and we were on the same page with it. So it was working really, really well. The band started in 210, so you got to remember 210 to 213, I had this tumour growing and little things were going on, and it didn't go diagnosed. So all of a sudden, Adam's, you know, stuff happened, and it needed to be finished for me, and they finished, and that was fine. And we recorded a great album, and we went on, and the boys did, you know, a little handful of work. But I just think it just
can people that are listening to our podcast today, can they still hear this album? Anyway?
Yeah, they can. It's funny because we got off all social media stuff, so Spotify, iTunes, all that. It closed down when the boys finished up. I call it the best album that no one's ever heard.
Yeah.
And it is, you know.
Well, that's what I thought about my band's album as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So even less people heard ours.
But, you can go to Spotify, and because Liam put it out as under Liam's name, we couldn't create, you know, he said, "Is this all right?" I said, "Yeah, mate, I don't care. It's a long time ago, and it's great to be out there." And, you know, Liam Delby, and it's Neon City, and, you know, you have to search Liam Delby because Spotify doesn't give you the option.
It's hard to release the same master recordings under the same name at a different time. So it makes sense.
So you can catch all that stuff on Spotify, and it was there was some good traction there. We were talking to some big managers in Australia, and there was some
Can I ask
traction
you
there.
just a question to wind this up? Because I'm going through it literally right at the moment.
Yeah, I talk a lot.
When you were to listen to that album, if you still do, have you reached a point where you can appreciate maybe what people loved about it at the time, and hear less of the mistakes and things you wished you did differently? Because I've only just reached that point with the Candela Lie album that I can understand when people write, we put it out on Spotify and Apple and everything recently. One comment we had on one of the posts was a genuine comment from a guy who said this before, and I didn't want to hear a bar of it. This is in my top 5 Australian albums ever. And he meant it back then, and he still means it. All I could hear was the mistakes and the things I wish I did differently. But I can listen to it now with fresher ears. Are you able to do that? And that point probably comes to people at different times.
I love all the songs. There's no mistakes on that album.
No. Well, a mistake doesn't necessarily have to be a technical mistake. I wish I wrote a better part for that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, no. For me, I'm 100% happy.
Have you always felt that way, though?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember.
Well, that must have been a good place to be.
Yeah, we stayed in this hut with no electricity. Well, there's electricity, but no, the sun's coming up, and we're going to, Lighthouse, which was the studio recording, which the album was called. And I'm about to track my parts for the day. And Liam's song, actually, one of Liam's song, Lying to Myself, we put one of Liam's songs he wrote completely himself on there.
Yep.
And I had a bit of music, and I'm thinking, I want a little entry to melody line into this. And I wrote it down as music. And I didn't know how to play it, but I knew how to read it and play it. And I was sitting with Rick, and he's looked at me. I said, recording's not a visual thing, Rick. So I'm playing this part, reading it, and that came up the night before. And I think, geez, I'm lucky that I got that in there. Yep. I know it. I guess it's the musician. We worked really hard, and I worked really hard at all those parts. And still today, I'm really stoked with the individual performance of that sound of bass and those lines.
Awesome.
Yeah.